The deputy asked my Imani where she really slept, and I watched her lead us past the master bedroom, past the guest room with the fluffy pillows, straight to a utility closet that smelled like shame and fabuloso. Ain't no bigger than a coat rack, yoga mat on the floor, plastic cup in the corner. Darius's mama Linda scoffed behind us, silk robe swishing, talking about, she likes her quiet space. That's when the officer keyed his radio, voice dropping low and official. Requesting supervisor, possible domestic servitude situation. I looked at my daughter's trembling bronze hands, at the yellow bruise blooming on her wrist like a flower nobody wanted to water, and thought, Lord have mercy, this is what I came home to. 23 years I spent overseas building something that would outlast me, and my baby been sleeping in a closet. The deputy's eyes met mine and I saw him cataloging everything, the plastic cup with the brown ring around the rim, the single threadbare towel folded in the corner, the way Imani wouldn't look at nobody, just kept her head down like she was apologizing for breathing. Linda shifted her weight, rings catching the light, rings I knew came from Imani's jewelry box because I bought them myself before I left for London. Darius stood in the hallway with his arms crossed, fresh fade sharp enough to cut, cologne thick enough to choke on, looking at me like I was trespassing in a house my own money built. But to understand how my 31-year-old daughter ended up sleeping in a utility closet in Cascade Heights, we got to go back 5 years to when I was still in Manchester closing the biggest textile deal of my career. I remember the day Imani called me, voice bright and bubbly like champagne at New Year's, telling me she met someone at Greater Faith Missionary Baptist Church. Darius Monroe, she said his name like it was poetry, like it was promise. Said he quoted scripture, opened doors, made her mama's peach cobbler recipe on the first date, even though he ain't never met me. I was sitting in a conference room with mahogany walls and men in suits who thought my accent meant I couldn't read fine print. And I told my baby I was happy for her, told her to send pictures, told her I'd fly back for the engagement party even though I knew the Singapore meeting would make that impossible. 3 months later she sent me a photo, her caramel skin glowing in a cream dress, Darius standing behind her with his hand on her shoulder, Linda in the background wearing my good pearls, the ones I left in the guest room safe. I stared at that photo on my phone screen and felt something shift in my spirit, something my grandmother used to call a knowing. But I pushed it down because my baby sounded happy and I was 8 time zones away trying to build generational wealth. That's the thing about being a mother who chose ambition, you spend half your life second-guessing the choice and the other half defending it. The wedding happened without me, just like the engagement party, just like most of Imani's life after I left for London when she was 8 years old. She sent me a video, her walking down the aisle of Greater Faith, gospel choir singing Here and Now, Darius waiting at the altar in a suit that probably cost more than he made in 3 months. I watched that video in a hotel room in Amsterdam and cried into my complimentary robe, because my baby was getting married and I was looking at her through a screen. 2 weeks later I wired $85,000 to her account, told her to expand the salon, told her to hire more stylists, told her I was proud even though pride felt like swallowing glass when you ain't been there to see the work that made you proud. She called me crying, thanking me, telling me Darius said I was the best mama in the world. That should have been my second warning, the way he inserted himself into the gratitude like he had something to do with the money I earned. But I was tired and the deal with the Singapore distributor was falling apart, and I told myself marriage meant sharing everything, even thank yous. 6 months into the marriage, Imani stopped posting photos of the salon. Her voice on our weekly calls got quieter, flatter, like somebody had turned down the volume on her personality. When I asked about the business, she said Darius was helping her manage things, said he had better business sense, said Linda was keeping the books because she used to work in accounting 30 years ago. My stomach dropped, but Imani laughed it off, said I worried too much, said marriage was about trust. Then the calls about Linda's cancer started, Imani's voice shaking, saying the doctors found something aggressive, saying they needed $78,000 for a specialist in Houston who didn't take insurance. I was in Berlin when that call came, standing in front of a window overlooking the city, and every instinct I had screamed wrong, wrong, wrong. But my baby was crying, begging, saying Linda was the only mother figure she had since I was always gone, and that landed like a fist to my chest because it was true. I wired the money in 3 installments, told Imani to keep me updated, told her to send me the doctor's information so I could research the treatment. She never sent it. Instead, Darius got on the phone, voice smooth as butter on hot cornbread, thanking me, calling me Ma, telling me Linda was responding well. telling me Imani was stressed and I shouldn't burden her with questions. That's when I opened the contingency file I'd created the day I signed the mansion's deed 26 years ago. The file my lawyer called paranoid and I called prepared. I paid a private investigator $800 to check Linda Monroe's medical records, and 3 weeks later he sent me a report that made my blood run cold. No cancer diagnosis, no specialist visits, no treatment history. Just a woman who'd been taking spa weekends in Myrtle Beach and buying designer handbags at Lenox Square. I booked a flight to Atlanta the same day I got that report, but Imani got sick before I could land. High fever, she texted me. Can't get out of bed, Darius is taking care of everything. For 8 days she didn't answer my calls, just sent short texts that didn't sound like her. Words too formal, too careful. When she finally called, her voice was different, hollow, like somebody had scooped out the center and left the shell. She told me she signed papers while she was sick, told me Darius said it was for protection, told me she didn't really remember doing it but the notary stamp was there so it must have happened. My hands shook so hard I dropped my phone, and when I picked it up I heard myself screaming, asking what papers, demanding to know what she signed, but she just kept saying the house, Mama. He said we needed to put his name on the house. The line went dead before I could respond, and when I called back, Darius answered. His voice wasn't smooth anymore, it was sharp, cold. The voice of a man who'd won something he didn't earn. He told me Imani was his wife, told me the house was in his name now, told me I could visit when I came back to the States but I'd need to call first because it was his home and he decided who came through his door. Then he hung up on me. I sat in that London apartment with the contingency file spread across my coffee table and planned my return like a military operation. My lawyer, a man I'd worked with for 33 years, pulled every clause we'd buried in the original deed, every protection I'd insisted on when people called me paranoid for not trusting my own daughter. Turns out I wasn't paranoid enough because I'd trusted her husband. The flight back to Atlanta was the longest 11 hours of my life, my mind cycling through every phone call I'd missed, every video I'd watched instead of showing up, every wire transfer I'd sent instead of coming home. By the time I landed at Hartsfield Jackson, I had a plan, a court order in process, and a rage so cold it felt like clarity. I drove through Cascade Heights at dawn, past houses I used to know, trees older than my grandbaby's grandbaby would be, money and history living side by side like they always did in Atlanta. When I pulled into the circular driveway of my mansion, Darius's BMW was parked where my car used to sit, and I felt something inside me click into place, the final piece of understanding. I walked up to the door I'd walked through 1,000 times, rang the bell I'd installed, and waited while the security system I'd paid for chimed its cheerful song. Darius opened the door with that same smooth smile, the one that probably worked on Imani when she was lonely and I was overseas, but it died when he saw my face. I walked past him without asking permission, heels clicking against the marble I'd selected in Italy, and found my daughter on her knees scrubbing a floor that was already clean. That's when I called my lawyer, voice steady, words clear. Open the contingency file. That's when I demanded to see where she slept. That's when the deputy asked the question that would close the loop I'd been traveling for 5 years, and Imani led us to that closet. Now, standing in the hallway with the supervisor on his way and Linda's silk robe rustling with fake indignation, I watched my daughter's face as the deputy explained what domestic servitude meant under Georgia law. I watched recognition dawn slow like morning, watched her realize she didn't have to call it normal anymore. The supervisor arrived 38 minutes later with 2 more deputies and a forensic accountant I'd hired that morning. Here's what they found in the next 6 hours. Linda Monroe never had cancer. The $78,000 bought her a condo she was renting out for passive income. Imani's salon had been profitable until Darius drained the account and told her it failed, and the signature on the deed was done under coercion while my daughter was medically compromised. But here's what I did that made it personal. I'd spent 23 years building relationships with import distributors, and one of them owed me a favor. 3 phone calls later, every supplier Darius used for his consulting business received documentation showing he'd forged my daughter's signature on loan applications in her name. His credit score dropped 200 points by dinner time. Linda's rental income disappeared when the forensic accountant filed a lien on the Myrtle Beach property for restitution. Darius's wrists disappeared behind handcuffs while neighbors gathered on the sidewalk, filming, whispering, watching the Monroe name crumble in real time. He looked at Imani one last time, tried to say something that might sound like an apology, but I stepped between them, blocking his view of my child. "You done talking?" I told him. 3 months later, the restitution check arrived for $93,000, the deed transferred back to Imani's name alone, and I stood in the kitchen teaching my daughter how to make peach cobbler the way my grandmother taught me, the way I should have taught her before I left. She wore her locks freshly twisted, skin glowing with cocoa butter, voice returning to its natural volume. We mounted the foreclosure notice for Linda's condo in a frame where the closet used to be, and every time we walked past it, we smiled. If this journey resonated with you today, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and drop a comment letting me know what part of the world you're repping. I need to know who's riding with me. Your words down there might be the exact spark someone needs to keep their fire burning when they feel like giving up. We share these truths so nobody has to feel like they're fighting in the dark alone. Stay woke, watch the company you keep, and never forget that your life is a reflection of the moves you choose to make. Stay solid, you feel me?